Recording. Hi, how you doing? This is Founder Time podcast with Steve Daley. How you doing? He's the founder and director of radKIDS, a nonprofit organization that teach your kids how to be safe. So, can you tell us a little bit more? Can you tell
Sure.
why you founded?
I'm really happy to be here with you, Niurka, and your audience. And I appreciate you being here. I know this is regularly an entrepreneur podcast, but entrepreneurs. I consider myself one as well, even though I run a nonprofit. I think they're kind of the same in some ways, as I've learned over the last couple of years. But if you have a family or you have children, this hopefully will have some value to you for what we might be able to share with you. But my name's Steve Daley. I'm the executive director and the founder of the radKIDS Personal Empowerment Safety Education Program. That's a long word, a long phrase that we just say radKIDS. And a rad kid is a cool kid that doesn't let anybody hurt them. So it's kind of what we want our kids to be. We use that rad term, which I think we stole from California, but I'm not really sure. But it's still out there thanks to the X Games. So rad actually meant resisting aggression defensively or stopping violence in a child's life. But for kids, we don't get into any of that. It's a rad kid is a cool kid, and they have their own boundaries and they have their process. So I'm the founder of an organization. Of that organization, I've been blessed to train over 6,500 instructors over the last 20 years around the nation and around the world. Not enough, but there's probably a couple thousand that are still very active, besides COVID. But they're incredible people. So I'm kind of the leader of a group of incredible warriors out there doing some great things, including in the military world. When we met, one of the reasons I wanted to really do your podcast was I grew up as a military kid. I always call it a Navy brat because my father was a submarine sailor, and I spent time on bases and in Navy military housing and at military recreation centers and all the things that went with it. And I actually thrived in that environment, but I saw many challenges for many people. And I think we could do so much. So I've been able to take radKIDS into partnerships with the Marines, with the Navy, with the National Guard, and hopefully even further with the Army as we go to help families around the world. We've even been in Alaska with the National Guard as well. So it's my hope that we can share some information and give kids skills. That's the other thing that radKIDS does that's different. I think that's pretty much a general, by the way, our website is radkids.org for anybody who has interest in that. And I'm going to give you a free gift at the end. I didn't tell Niurka this, but if you're interested in it, I'm going to give you a code a little bit later, and then you can get a downloaded card to actually have a conversation with your own kids to start that process, which I really want to give you a value today. So rather than just talk, but as I warned Niurka before we started, I will continue to talk, but I'm going to take a breath and let her come back in here. But I'm very passionate about protecting children, and that I won't apologize for. I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm just trying to protect children. I have a big problem with predators. I was a police officer for 21 years before I did this. And then I've been doing this for 20 years. And then I can get into my why, I guess, in the middle, because as entrepreneurs, we always want to know our why, right? But I'll get in that in just a second.
Yeah.
How am I doing so far?
Really great, because at the end of the day, our kids are the heart of families, right? So we have to protect them. We have to know how to have that conversation and leave aside the taboos and the prohibited conversations, because if we don't have it, somebody else will, and they might hurt them.
Yeah, I am, and as a mama, I know you're a mama. So as a mama, I think that's really important. One of the things I always try to say a couple of points I don't want to go too much into the dark side in the world we live in and all of that, because I think we have enough things to fear. But the one thing to remember is that if we don't have these conversations with our children, if we don't empower our children, not expectations, and I can talk a little bit about that later if you want, but not expectations. But if we don't empower our children to be able to recognize, avoid, resist, and if necessary, escape violence, harm, or victimization in their lives, then the only one we're giving power to is the predator.
Right.
You can't really sit in the middle. And a lot of parents get stuck in the middle because we don't know what to do. And I understand that. I was the same parent. So I understand that. So I've been blessed with this opportunity and been sharing it for a long time. And I've learned a lot along the way. And I learned mostly from children. What they want to know is not that there's scary things in the world, but how to stop them. Right. And they need permission to do that. And that's the best permission comes from their parents. They need context to understand it and not be afraid of it. We were raised very differently than that. When I was raised as a kid, it was don't talk to strangers, followed by be polite. And that meant what? And I was in the military environment, so it was yes, sir, yes, ma'am, to anybody who was older than me. So it was very different than having my own boundaries. Respect was more important than my own personal boundaries. And sadly, that can shift the power to somebody else. You don't have to be rude. And you can always be polite, but when someone's trying to hurt you, that's not a time to be polite. That's a time to respond and stop you. Instinctively, we want to do that. Our instinctive brain takes over, and we call that fight or flight. And what happens in that situation is most people freeze because they have all these expectations in their cognitive brain, and their instinctive brain wants to get busy. And the reality is they're kind of fighting against each other. So they freeze. Most people don't realize that in fight or flight, if you give your child do's and don'ts, you're not really teaching them anything. They can freeze them up. They're better off is, what are you gonna do? Questioning, and that'll be on the card as well for you, is what would you do in this situation, rather than telling them what to do? Because when it becomes their plan, and then they can reenact that process, it becomes not afraid anymore. Fear, the thing that takes away fear is education. And education can create fear. Just watch the news, right? So, but that's not real education. That's manipulation. But education can really is the only thing that can replace fear in our lives. It's natural. It's going to happen. If we don't recognize it, understand it, know it, we tend to be a little away from it. Doesn't mean we're afraid. We're cautious. But when it becomes dangerous, it can create fear. And the only thing is, as children have taught me over the last 20 years, is, one little girl in the Midwest said this the best. She went up to her radKID instructor at the end of a class and she said, this stuff's really important. And the teacher looked at her and said, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I am with myself 24 hours a day. And I think that's the biggest thing to remember as a parent. Even if you're the greatest parent in the world, and I'm going to assume everybody is, that you're doing everything you think you can, when you're not there, your child either is going to meet your expectations or create their own outcome. And I think you want them to create their own outcome. So I just shared a bunch of stuff in there because of your question, but I didn't get into my why yet. So I have a feeling you want me to go back to how this all started for me, probably, right?
Oh, yes. And I want to hear it. You have so much experience right now, and you have saved so many kids so far. But there's so many left, right? So we all have to do our part, and we have to start by having that conversation with our own kids, and then spread it to other kids, because predators are skillful. That's what they are good at, right? They manipulate, and kids believe anything, and then the belief is their fault.
Right. So. And we talked about this when we met, is that, and there's probably a lot of women in your podcast, and I learned very long time ago, I lost my mother early in life, but I learned very long time ago from my grandmother that some women have a gift. It's called intuition. And that when women use that, and there's probably podcasts on that alone, when women use that power, that feeling, and turn that into power, what I can do with that, recognizing, avoiding, resisting. So they use that. We call it women's intuition. Men have it too, except we call it indigestion. So because we're socialized a little differently. So you go, oh, something's not right. I think I ate something. No, you're in trouble. Pay attention. So men are a little different because we're supposed to carry this flag. Like women are supposed to fix everything. Biggest flag, hardest thing in the world, right? But men are supposed to be, take the bullet, stand out in front. And the reality is we're all kind of the same when it comes to responding to danger. If there was a dinosaur, and luckily we don't have any of them right now, if there was a dinosaur, I think we'd both be running. So it really doesn't matter. So the process is there. But that intuition or that instinctive response is a gift when you use it. The sad part is we don't think about it as adults, but women use it as power, hopefully. Men can also use it as power, but sometimes call it indigestion. But when children get that feeling, at about 3 years old, the brain develops to a point where they can actually recognize that they don't like it. What they don't know what to do is do with it all the time, but they recognize they don't like it. And so if someone manipulates or hurts them, they understand that they don't like it, but then the predator says something like, well, your mom or dad will get mad at both of us. You'll get in trouble if you tell. And what tricks into them is their understanding of that feeling is they did something wrong. They screwed up. So they did something wrong. Because most parents tell their kids, especially in the military, that's the way I was brought up, tell their children do's and don'ts. And I always used to joke. My father would say, do it. And, he'd say, jump. And I'd say, how high? So that was that was there. There's a time for that. Absolutely a time for that. But that's not empowering your child to be able to respond, improvise, adapt, and overcome into situations. I think I just went in the Marine Corps, but it doesn't really matter, or the Army. But the point is that empowering your child changes everything. Predators do not stop until you make them.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. Not only if we don't talk to her, if we don't empower our kids, the power goes to the predator. Well, they're going to wait for their opportunity because that's how they respond. They don't usually, there's no everything. They don't usually pick just one child. Elizabeth Smart's been an advocate for radKIDS for years. Elizabeth was different. Elizabeth, when she was taken, it was an obsession. It was very, very different. He came into the house, he took her, that was very different. But most of these predators are based on opportunity, and they're looking for the opportunity. So by preparing your child, not paranoid, prepare your child to have a strong boundary, a mindset of how dare you touch me instead of help me, is an incredible gift that can last a lifetime. And I'll talk about that in the principle. Well, actually, let me give you a story of how that brain process works, because I think this can help people in your audience. We had as you said, we've been fortunate enough to save thousands of children. And I'm going to put it this way. They save themselves by being able to be educated and have opportunity. And so many people in our organization have that. We always say if there's a child that's been saved that we know of, then what happens is it's a save for everybody because we're all fighting for the same battle. But this one really kind of changed me about 10 years ago. We had a young girl in the Midwest who woke up at 2:00 in the morning, and there was a man in her bed. He had climbed through the window of the trailer, got into her bed. She was 9 years old, was patting her hair, saying, she told the police later, saying to her, patting her hair, saying to her, "Don't worry, baby, it's just daddy." Now, if you think about this, what was the girl's response? What do you think her response was in that situation?
Safety.
Normally.
Yeah, it was her dad. If she was still dreaming, she would
It
have
could be her
believed it.
dad, but she knew it wasn't her dad. So now, all of a sudden, she knows there's a bad guy there. So what's her response now?
She's scared. She
Yeah.
freeze. She don't know what to do.
She should be, right? She should be scared. She should either scream, she should yell, she should freeze, she should do all those things. That's not what she did. What she did is she thought, and her first thought was, how do I get to my safe zone? And one of the things we teach children is to identify your safe zones. And then after we teach them their self-value and self-worth, we teach them how to get to their safe zone. So, but we can't tell them, cover every scenario. Like we would never say, if man was in your bed, what would you do? Because then kids would be in therapy. That is not the way to do it. So, they'd be scared. So anyway, this little girl had been around kids. So her first thought was, how do I get to my safe zone? So instead of screaming, which may have put her in more danger, she wanted to get to her parents' room, which was outside her door. Now, she told the bad guy, according to the law enforcement report, she told the bad guy, I got to go to the bathroom. 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 Now, any of us who have had children know that when they have to go to the bathroom, you're better off just letting them go because it's going to happen. So but bottom line is she kept saying it. And if bad guys weren't dumb, sometimes we wouldn't stand a chance. But he said, well, hurry and come right back. So the little girl got up and starts walking across the room to the door. But then another problem occurs. As she got to the door, she's ready to go out and escape. But as she turns, she sees her 5-year-old sister on the other side of her bed with the guy still in it. So now what? So when you give them do's and don'ts, you can't cover everything, right? So now what? What do you tell her to leave? Do you tell her to stay? There's no right answer here. What you do is empower her to make a choice. Well, her choice was, I'm not leaving my sister, which I doubt anybody would if you know, we've had many children help each other. So that's even natural. But I'm not leaving my sister, but I'm close enough to my safe zone. So I always share when I share this story that as the girl crossed the room, getting away from the bad guy, was she getting stronger every step? Yeah. Until, this isn't going the right way because I can't leave my sister. So she turns, has her distance, which makes her stronger, and now decides, opens the door, looking at her parents' door, and yells, "Help! There's a man in my bed! There's a man in my bed!" And of course, the worst thing that would happen to any of us if we heard that in the middle of the night. But the parent jumped up. The bad guy, coward that he was, jumped up, went out the window he came in, took half the frame of the trailer with him. He was going so fast, and bolted down the street. As the parents came into the room, he was gone. Half the trailer side of it's gone. The 5-year-old wakes up. What's going on? She slept through the whole thing, which is a good thing. And then they call the police. The police arrived. Only 3 officers on the midnight shift. We're talking about defunding our police in this country. You do that, and it's going to be a bad thing. But anyway, some departments are running minimal anyway. But three officers, but 2 show up, and because there's a violation that just happened, right? And they get there, and what can they do for this little girl now? That's another reason we need to teach our kids, because when and I can go back to that story if you want, but that's why I changed my mind, is I thought I could fix everything when I was a young police officer, and you can't do that. But anyway, finishing up this, in the teachable moment for all of this, this little girl, who's the one who saved her? Her, right?
She saved herself.
She saved herself, right? And that's the whole key here. She saved herself. Nobody can do anything. But the police show up. What do they want to do? Catch the bad guy. So they call dispatch and say, how many, could give me ask the dispatcher for the list of registered sex offenders within 3 miles of the girl's house, figuring that this guy was on foot when he ran, okay? So they got nothing else to do. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, they start knocking on doors. How many registered sex offenders do you think were within 3 miles of the house?
There's a lot. I know usually there's about 5,000 in an area, sometimes.
Well, that's not, there's one every square mile in the country. So you are right, there's a lot. But there were 39 within 3 miles of her house. So now they start knocking on the doors. They get halfway into the teens, and a guy opens the door. He's all cut up. He's sweaty. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, right? He's all sweaty. The police officer goes, "Sir, what have you been doing?" And they have every right to check on you because he was a convicted sex offender, okay? So anyway, the guy says, "I was working out." The police officer said, "Oh, that's a strange workout. You seem to have hurt yourself. Ask him to step out the house." And the other police officer takes the father and daughter down in the car by the house. And the little girl goes, "That's the guy." He gets arrested immediately and begins serving that night the 7 years of the sentence that he was let out early for rape and sexual assault of a child. So the society we live in puts the power in the adults' hands, but we need to shift that and give the opportunity, not the responsibility, to children. The responsibility to educate and empower our children belongs to us, the adults, and the parents in their life. And that's why we're around, because we want to help people understand how to do that, rather than tell people do's and don'ts and things that aren't going to work. As a police officer, I got to show up many times after crime and victimization, and it's very hard to do. And I have great respect for law enforcement doing what they do, but the system is not designed to protect. It's designed to respond after. And I think that's why people sometimes don't understand, like, well, what are you doing? Well, they're doing the best they can, but you want to defund police. What you should be doing is adding police, increasing their training, making it better so that you have more support, just like the people who have resources always have their own private security. Interesting, isn't it? So again, your private security or your safety starts with you. I kept blabbing, so let's go ahead. Your turn.
No, that's good. That's good. It's good points. You know, we complain about the police sometimes, but you know, they're the person that come when we need it, right? They're the first responder.
Yeah, there's good and bad in everybody. I mean, there's good police officers, there's bad police officers, good school teachers, bad school teachers, good doctors, bad doctors. I mean, we're people, we're flawed. Right. So the reality is, but the one thing I think that it doesn't matter who you are or what your job is that I believe is that no one has the right to hurt you. Nobody. Period. And you don't have the right to hurt them. So if you don't mind, I'll share right now the 3 foundational principles, because I kind of just did the 3 foundational principles for radKIDS that I think every parent can share with their child, and they're the foundation of that card, that free gift we're gonna offer as well, so that your audience can share with their parents, or when they find this podcast, they can share the podcast as well, because you're gonna let them do that. But that's your information. But here's what parents always ask me: what's the number one thing that I can tell my child? Steve, obviously you can talk forever. So what's the number one thing I can tell my child? Well, the number one gift that you can have with your children is that they know you always have their back. Now that's really easy to say, but it's hard to do, because as parents, we still have to control the structure and a lot of things that we don't understand. I think when I was young, my father told me, if I could, now remember, he's a military guy. My father told me, if I could take your head off, put in what I need, and then put it back on, we would understand each other. and I would go, you can't do that. He goes, I know, but if I could, I would. And I'm like, but as I got older and became a father myself, I went, he wasn't as dumb as I thought. So there's a time and a process for all of that. But I think the foundational principles aren't just for children, they're for all of us. And so the 3 things that we incorporate in radKIDS for your children, and you don't have to be in radKIDS to do it. These are, people always ask me where I get it. I don't know where I got this. Some people say from the Old Testament. I have no idea where I got it, or I would tell you who I got it from, but this is what I think the message that we deliver and that you can deliver to your kids. Number 1, I got your back no matter what. I got you. Living up to that, like I said, is hard. But then how do you give them power? Number 1, talk to your child that nobody has the right to hurt them. Nobody has the right to hurt them, because they're special. And that's where you say, I love you and I got you no matter what. And I don't want anyone to hurt you. Now, if I'm around, I'll do what I can. But but nobody gets to hurt you. 5 to 105 years old, brothers, sisters, family, nobody gets to hurt you, because you're special. Now, parents always say to me, or will say to me, well, my kid knows that. I have a house, I give them food, I buy them games, I give them what they need. No, that's not what they need. From 2 to 11, they want to please you, and they need social and emotional back. So children are waiting from 2 to 11. They, believe it or not, they want to please you. I know some parents are going, that's not true. It is true. So there's a psychological need to do it. But what they really want is 5 minutes of your time. Look at them in the eye and saying, I love you, and you did good, and that was awesome. And I'm not talking about a trophy here. I'm talking just about normal acknowledgement of who they are, because most parents, I know, love their children. But sometimes the way they understand how to show that may have not been the same from within their families. And we're all different. But what your kids need to know, and once they know it, you don't have to worry about it anymore. But once they know is that I'm special means there's nobody like you, and you're so important to me. Now, that transition's got to go to them, but it starts with permission. No one has the right to hurt you. Actually covers not strangers, covers everyone. Most children are hurt by people they know.
Yeah.
So no one has the right to hurt you, gives them power, personal boundaries. And it best comes from parents, caregivers, grandparents. It can come from anybody in the family. So, because the message should be same for all of us, right? So no one has the right to hurt you, because you're special, you count, you matter, self-value and self-worth. I taught a college class, for 3-credit college class on just that all by itself. So there's quite a bit there, but it's not that hard. Once you accept it, you are somebody that counts. And that's the first thing you need to defend yourself in a situation. If you don't have that self-value and self-worth, a lot of bad things can happen. Not only can fear and victimization, but anger and violence can increase. Watch what's going on in our world sometimes today, some of the things that are going on. The people that are screaming and yelling, not the peaceful protesters, the people that are screaming and yelling, okay, sometimes they're screaming and yelling because they don't even hear themselves. And they're just acting out rather than being strong from within. So no one has the right to hurt you is a foundation that I think we all should have. 5 to 105 as well, right? So rule number 1 is no one has the right to hurt you. Rule number 2 for everybody is, since no one has the right to hurt you, you don't have the right to hurt anyone else. Sounds like common sense, doesn't it? You don't have the right to hurt anyone else, including yourself. Now, when we're teaching children, that we use that in our rules because of all the safety context about bike helmets and seat belts and all those things you need to do to protect yourself, like even drugs. RadKIDS don't take drugs because we don't hurt ourselves. It's not that they're wrong. It's not that they're illegal. It's not none of that. If we really want to have a war on drugs, my opinion is it's through self-value and self-worth, because the only thing that's going to stop us from taking drugs is we choose not to, period. And sometimes even when I go to the doctor, I argue with the doctor and I go, I'm not taking it. So the bottom line is you got to decide for yourself, and you do that based on the knowledge, the education, and your choice. And I think that's a gift that we all have in this country, and we need to empower that. So the second thing is you don't have the right to hurt anyone else, including yourself. So that even covers, by the way, since this is parents and adults, that even covers suicide prevention without mentioning any of the bad words: abduction, bullying, child abuse, sex assault. We're covering them all, but we're not mentioning any of them, okay, because we're talking to kids. But here's where everything changes. Rule number one, no one has the right to hurt you. Rule number two is you don't have the right to hurt anybody else. If that worked, if that was the way everything worked all the time, would we even be going through the social unrest we're dealing with right now? No. So the world isn't always fair. Most people are good still, but the world isn't always fair. So when you look at number two, you got to add a little bit more. So no one has the right to hurt you, including yourself, unless someone is trying to hurt you, and then you have every right to stop them. Now, where does that come from? Well, that's really powerful. The unless word means it shifts the power, not the responsibility, but the power to your child. So now you're giving them permission to defend themselves, okay, when someone's hurting them. Now, the hard part for some parents is, I'll decide what hurt means. No, your child decides what hurt means, because you're not going to know what's going on all the time. Now, if you find out it's not hurt, then you have an explanation and discussion with your child. But simple, again, military kid, right? Bee stings me. I go, my father goes, that didn't hurt. Oh, yes, it did. It hurt. I understand you want me to suck it up, buttercup, but the reality is it hurt. So I'm like, acknowledge what your child has, then move on how to handle it, okay? So unless someone's trying to hurt you, and then you have every right to stop them. Now, where's that come from? Stop them. That is permission to stop the threat or the bad guy or the boogeyman or whatever in their life, okay? That is based on the law. In every state in the United States, you have the right to defend yourself, period. You have the right. Now, people have an opinion. People have an opinion. They always do. But when it gets to the final judgment, the law is the law, and you have the right to defend yourself. You don't have the right to hurt other people, but hurt has nothing to do with it. Stopping them from hurting you is your right by law. It's called reasonable self-defense. And when you say self-defense to people, and it's the first time I've mentioned that, the problem with self-defense is everybody has an opinion what that is. No, reasonable self-defense is this: stopping someone from hurting you. That's reasonable self-defense. It could be walking the other way. It could be yelling loudly. It could cause physical resistance, poking them in the eyeballs to stop them, depending upon the context. But the reality is giving them permission to stop somebody when they're being hurt is a context. Now, people sometimes say, well, wait a minute. If you do that, won't the kid hit the wrong person? Well, knock on wood, okay, almost 20 years now of doing this, over 350,000 children educated, not one complaint of inappropriate use of physical skill. So I understand people's opinions, but in the context of what we're delivering through the empowerment process and the responsibility, remember, no one has the right to hurt you, and you don't have the right to hurt them. Remember, there's not just hit what you want. It's stop someone from hurting you. And kids are smart. They're capable of doing that. I'm going to go by the track record. We've had 180 plus saves of abduction, over 50,000 sexual assault saves. Empowering children shifts the power to our children and takes away the opportunity from the bad guy. So back again, because I got one more rule for you. But the first rule is no one has the right to hurt you. And it's not just words, as I shared with you. Use that card that I'm going to give you, because it's a great starting talking tool with your kids. Number two, okay, you don't have the right to hurt anyone else, including yourself, unless someone's trying to hurt you and you have every right to stop them. Not finish them, not kill them. Okay, military, not finish them, not kill them. Stop them, okay? And stop them means making it stop, okay? And that's reasonable self-defense in every state. And rule number 3, which ties it all together, and I think is actually the most important rule in radKIDS, is if anyone ever hurt you before you became a radKID, or hurt you from this day forward, it's not your fault when someone hurts you. And I'll say to the kids, well, whose fault is it? And they go, theirs. And I say, absolutely. It's their fault. And so you can tell and keep telling until somebody listens. This isn't tattling. Tattling is trying to get someone, if many of us have had more than one child, and the reality is tattling is trying to tell someone, to get someone in trouble. Telling is trying to help yourself or someone else. We tell our children, we ask our children, so I don't say the word twice, we ask our children to tell at school, at all these places, but many times the adults don't respond. And even in school, if they say, you send your child to school and say, if anything happens, tell the teacher. Well, the kid goes, I did, they didn't do anything. And once that happens, or they said, stop tattling, sit down. So they didn't listen to the child and acknowledge it. As parents, we can listen. We don't need to judge right away. Listen to what the kid's saying and help them come up with the context, because their plan's going to be better than ours. And rule number 3 is for anybody who's ever been hurt before. And for many adults on this call, we've been hurt. So think about these rules. No one has the right to hurt me. I don't have the right to hurt anybody else. If anyone hurts me, I have the right to stop them, and it's not my fault, so I can tell. Do any of us know adults in our lives that don't know those rules?
That's plenty.
So think about how much we can. So we give these kids at a foundational level, and you can do it too. Start with that. But remember, we start the process cognitively, and then we develop it through activity-based training. And this is the other thing that makes radKIDS so different. We do not do lectures. Right now I'm doing a Zoom, right? So we do not do lectures. We do conversation and empowerment to train the brain. The best weapon you got is to train that brain. And then we train the body to respond instinctively. And all of our physical resistance skills, or for some of you would call fighting, but it's not fighting, we're stopping. All of our physical resisting skills are to stop someone from hurting a child in an abduction or an assault. And we've been pretty successful. We cannot guarantee it. I wish we could. If I had the cure, like one purple pill in the morning and your kid is safe, I'd be pushing purple pills. You could be guaranteed. If there was a force field. Now, I saw the movie The Incredibles, so there might be a force field someday. If there was a force field, I'd be selling force fields, baby. Everybody should have a force field. Because I just don't want to see people hurt. Because once you're hurt, your journey to heal it doesn't just go away. Kids are pretty resilient, but they still have to get to the point of understanding it's not their fault. So when we look at those 3 things, these are powerful life skills that we have tied through personal safety. And that's really, people think we're a safety program. We're not. We're much more than that. So, and what we do is we provide life skills for children and empowerment skills. And every entrepreneur needs those, right? So we provide those, and everyone has a story. And as my grandfather said to me when I was a child, it's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. We have a word for that now, right? Called resiliency. And resiliency is, we also enhance resiliency because once we let them off the hook, they understand it doesn't belong to them. They can start their healing process in a much quicker way. Some people live their entire lives wondering why their parents weren't nice, why someone hurt them, why. All I can say on that is that I understand it. I'm not making light of it. I understand it. I really have a problem with people hurting other people, so I understand it. But you know what? There's no why in violence. And you're never going to understand predatory behavior or violent behavior. You're never going to understand it. But what we can do is stop it. We can evaluate it and discuss it the rest of our lives, but we can stop it. And when we stop it, it doesn't belong to us. And what a great gift for our kids.
Yeah, we need to teach our kids and ourselves stop being a victim.
Yeah, I mean, many times, when adults go through our instructor program, we train instructors all over the country, and that's our main function, is to train people like you or people in their communities who want to give back, mostly educators, law enforcement. We have many parent volunteers who teach in faith-based communities as well. And in the military, we've got quite a mix of people that are teaching through the Family Services Division. So there's a lot of opportunity here, but we train instructors because, and one of the things I've learned is everybody has a journey, because a lot of instructors, even though they're professional in handling things, we have to resolve as adults some of the things that happened when we were younger. And, you know, part of my story is my thesis for my master's degree was on resiliency, and I was looking for the cure. And because everyone used to say, well, you're a super resilient kid. And I'm like, what's that mean? So I did my thesis on super resiliency. And here's what I found out. There's no such thing. But there are kids that are more resilient than others. So we wanted to look at how that happened. No vitamins, no force fields. Life is life. So some kids handle it better than others, and there's kind of a process to it. But if you wanted to empower your children to handle it better, those 3 principles are a part of it. But more importantly, it's to understand what they need is, it's not my fault. And so when it's not my fault, then I can start with anger, not the why. There's no why anymore. It's gone. So resiliency, what I found out though is this, is that, and I kind of lost track there in a second. So I bailed to the left, and now I'm going to bail back to the right. Resiliency for our children, the best thing is it's the people in their lives, the school teachers, the coaches, you, the volunteers who help the children, who are there at a certain time. You don't even know it sometimes that you're there in their life and you're helping them and you're showing up. My father raised me. My father was a good man. He was also had an alcohol issue. Okay. So when he was a master chief, he was great. When he was drinking, he wasn't so great. So there were challenges, and I raised my brother from the age of 7. So there were challenges in our house like everybody has. Okay. I share that with you, but I want to tie it to a story to what I was just talking about. But I remember my junior high principal, who I got to meet later in life as a retired superintendent, showed up one day at my house with a basketball. And no reason, just knocked on the door. And he goes, I got something for you. I was a pretty good basketball player when I was young. I'm old now, so those days are over. But I was a pretty good basketball player. And I remember him handing me this, and it was one of those pivotal moments. And when I thought back doing my thesis is how that happened. But it was a pivotal moment. And he actually handed me the basketball and said, no matter what's going on in your life right now, you can always strive for the gifts and strengthen your gifts to escape whatever you're in. He was talking about my father without saying it. And so what he did is he told me, focus on your development. And didn't tell me to do it. He said, he gave me the opportunity to do it. When I did my thesis, I found out about people like him and how important they are in our lives. And I got to go back, and he was retiring as the superintendent of the school district, because it had been about 27 years since I'd seen him. I'll never forget walking in the door, and this is how life can be very strange. I knocked on the door, and the secretary said, can I help you? And I said, no, I'm here to see Mr. Johnson. I busted right in. Okay, that's probably the military kid in me. But I just went in, and he turned around from his desk. He was turned backwards. He turned around and he goes, hey, Steve, how are you? I hadn't seen him for 27 years. He had thousands of children pass his door. Why did he remember me? Why did he remember me? It's those people in your life that you may or may not remember, and the things we can do for others is the same. Can we be that generous to somebody else's life? And everybody who teaches the children in radKIDS, I share with them, you are changing a life. You are helping this child. As a parent, you are supporting your child in the best possible way by letting them know you have their back, giving them their own boundaries, enhancing their critical thinking skills or decision-making skills. This is what safety is about, not do's and don'ts. Those have expectations have 2 outcomes in the mind of a child. The compliance in the military, that's a good thing, but not always. Compliance and failure in the mind of a child, not ours, in the mind of a child. In our mind, it's usually right or wrong, but in a child's mind, it's compliance or failure. It's not about right or wrong. Right or wrong starts with self-value and self-worth. So I did it again. I kept blabbing, and I'm sure we're getting close to time, but I did cover the 3 principles. I covered empowerment versus expectation. And I guess I could give you the last golden nugget if you want it.
Definitely.
Okay.
Go for it.
So I kind of talked about this in a circle, but instead of me going blah, 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 why don't we just cut right down and make it a formula? It took me 15 years to figure out the Kentucky Fried Chicken or radKIDS. So here we go. Ready? So first thing to keep your child safe, permission. I talked about this in lots of different ways. You give them permission to be safe. You give them permission to defend themselves. You give them permission. Yes, they have an instinct, but they need your permission. It's okay. I got you. It's okay. You don't get to hurt people, but you do get to stop them. Think about those rules and how it lies. Permission. Number 2, context. You have to let go and give your child the opportunity to evaluate their own context. do's and don'ts have a reason, and there's a time. Strict command and go. The military, a lot of military, they're trained to go into things that are high threat. So they train you not to think a lot, because if you thought a lot, you'd go, I ain't going. So the reality is they work on pride, integrity, honor, and that's a different mindset. Your child's mindset should be, how dare you touch me, not help me, help me. That's what they need from that process. So context is, someone's trying to hurt me, I'm going to stop them. It's not even a question in their mind. Instinct and brain set together, I'm going to stop them. And then you need, and here's the, radKIDS is the only program in the country that does this. It's not a martial art, but in a self-defense program, it does this. It adds skill. So your formula is permission, context, and skill. And what does that equal? Personal empowerment. And what do I mean by skill? I mean, you got to teach them how to do it. You got to teach them to run, not tell them to run. You got to encourage them to yell loudly. Some young girls will screech. That's not the same as yelling. So we yell with power, how to yell with power, how to run. Simple things that you think will happen naturally, they won't. In most cases, in fight or flight, they all shut down. Now, they eventually will run. They eventually will fight back, but they've frozen. And while they're frozen, the bad guy has the power. So in radKIDS, through activities, we actually take that frozen point out. So once you give them permission and process, you get fight or flight. If the child can run, they run. If they can't run, and this is all the cases we've had so far, if they can't run, okay, then and someone grabs them, then they hit them. And the gross motor skills that we teach them. We don't teach them to hit anybody. We teach them to stop someone from hurting them. So that formula with the 3 principles, I just gave you the entire program. So except exactly how we do it in the methodology. But I think hopefully this is a good start for parents to at least give their kids the permission, understand that they're the ones going to make the choices. It's not about right or wrong. It's no one has the right to hurt you. And you don't have the right to hurt them, but you do have the right to stop them. Okay? And stop them doesn't mean an extra boot to the head. Stop them doesn't mean hit them after they're walking away. Stop them means stop them in context. And kids are smarter than you think, actually smarter than most of us. So the reality is they're capable of doing it if you give them permission. We don't want to teach our children to fight because there's always someone who can whoop you. But we want to teach our children to win. And in our world today, you can do that.
And this is something that it should be taught in every school. Our kids are.
I appreciate you bringing that up. radKIDS curriculum does meet, and we are in parts of Florida for sure. And I know that's probably your primary audience. We are in parts of Florida, not everywhere we should be, but we are. Metro Dade in the city of, I want to say Aventura, but it's not. It's the village of Palmetto Bay. The village of Palmetto Bay has had a program running for years very successfully, taught by the law enforcement agency. But we should be in the schools because, and we are working with the State House in Florida, for those of you in Florida, as well as everywhere. The curriculum meets educational standards in health and PE in all 50 states. So there's no reason for it not to be, except people go, we don't have time. Now there is a reason right now, it's activity-based. So that means we're trying to figure out, can we even put them in classrooms, right? But we will get back to that point. And there's nothing more empowering than personal skill development. Telling me something to do and teaching me how to do it and training me how to do it are 3 different levels. And that training level becomes ownership. And, you know, I know you were in the military, you shared that with me. They trained you to do things you didn't have skills for, right? So they trained you for that. So when we teach our kids, it has to include a component of training, not just tell them, because bad guys change the rules. And as you said earlier, they're smarter than we think, and they have an objective and a mission. And the only thing that's going to stop them is your kid going, stay back. And then if they grab them, hitting them. But most of the time, if your kid just goes, stay back, the bad guy goes, what's up with you? And then they can run because they shift the power at that moment where the bad guy doesn't have fear over your child. And that confuses them because they picked your child because they thought they could get away with it.
So they think they're soft prey.
Yeah, they look for the easiest target because basically predators are very cowardly, just so you know.
Mm-hmm. They are.
I'm not challenging them, but they are, because they pick on someone they think they can hurt. They pick on women, they pick on children, they pick on stuff. If they were the toughest, even at school and bullies, right? We always teach the kids how to stop a bully. We're the only curriculum in the country that teaches a kid how to stop a bully, okay? So not to fight, but how to stop a bully if necessary, and understanding their own boundaries and tie it all together. But the truth is, the only thing that's going to stop a bully is make them stop. So if you're trapped in the bathroom, then what do you do? Well, we're the only program that teaches them how to get out. So it starts with those 3 rules. Like I said, everything goes back to that process. And here's what I'd like to do, because I know we're running out of time, is I'd like to, anyone who's interested in the free card, you don't have to get it, but anyone who's interested, you can text to the number 33777. You text 33777 and you text the word stay back, the words stay back. Okay. That should trigger the process, and then they'll ask for your email, and we will send you that card. And of course, our email is also available at steve@radkids.org, and our website is radkids.org. But I want to give you something you can use out of this. So if you text 33777, I like those numbers because I thought they were lucky.
That's good.
33777, and the word stay back, it should trigger the process, which will send you the card. And you can start that process and be able to start a communication and support you in any way that we can. We've recently developed parental courses because of the COVID. So we are starting our first parental course next month to give parents the skills directly from taking the words that we talked about today and turning them into a little bit more power to enhance these concepts with you. So one of the good things, I guess, about COVID is we're now going to be able to serve some parents directly. And sometimes we can't get instructors, but we either try to get instructors or we're going to serve you directly if we can, because every child deserves the right to be safe and free in this country, as well as all of us. So,
yes, especially right now where there's so many, we're stuck at home, and sometimes it's the people at home that are hurting you, right?
Well, that's where no one, right? That's where no one. Here's the problem about home, and it's the biggest issue for most of our instructors in the organization is, well, how are we helping these kids? Well, that's one of the reasons we're going to parents. Sadly, in our world, we can't go directly to the kids, and that's probably good because some people are manipulating children, right? So, but sadly, we can't go directly to the kids, but they need to know that there's a safe zone and that they don't have to take it. The problem is the numbers are going down, except for extreme cases that get hospitalized for child abuse, and abuse, because we are locked down. But when we come out of this process, I think we're gonna see a little bit of a spike because the kids that, you're right, they've been hurt. So giving kids their own boundaries changes it. Most parents are good, gang. Most parents are good. But a lot of parents are losing their jobs. There's alcohol and drugs in some homes. That's when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And it's not okay to hurt anybody, period. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, or whatever, it's not okay. It's not our kids' fault, right? So, and I know I'm talking to everybody who knows that, but remember that when we fight for kids. It's hard to fight for kids because they're pretty resilient, and we don't see the damage usually until they're older. And then when they are unable to function in life a little bit because of the way they grew up, that's not their fault. Again, rule number 3. But it's very hard to fix. The earlier that we can get those principles in place, the earlier that we can create those boundaries, and that power in our children's lives can change the world and make it a better place. That's one of the quotes from one of the parents. So I'll just take it.
Pretty amazing. And very empowering. Something that we all need. We still got, can you tell us a little bit about how you started this journey? Why?
Yeah, I kind of jumped in ahead, and I apologize because we had planned it the other way, but
No, it's okay.
you've listened to all my passion, so I can do it just at the end too. You've listened to all my passion, and you probably wonder, well, what's wrong with this guy? How much caffeine does he have this morning? I'm fine. I'm good. Although if I was down south in the Cuban coffee, I would be looking for that, by the way, just so you know. That is one of my favorite things from South Florida. I'm like, where'd this come from? So
Yeah, I need about 15 minutes at least.
oh, it's beautiful. So definitely, hopefully we'll meet someday, and you and I can share a cup of coffee. That will be
Definitely.
awesome. Maybe not a whole cup, that might kill me, but the reality is it's great stuff. All right, so you've shared my passion. So where did this come from? I did America's Most Wanted years ago, the ABC, NBC, CBS, all that. And everybody wants to know about you, and I don't talk about me. It's about the kids. But I did share a little bit about me, but this is what I've always shared with everyone, and it's the truth. It changed my life. And it all began with 3 words. Where were you? About 30 years ago, I was a police officer in the state of Florida on the West Coast, the city of Largo. And I loved my job. I was a young police officer. I was going to save the world. I was going to do it. Matter of fact, I worked in rough neighborhoods, and when they tried to move me, the neighborhood protested. They wanted to keep me. So I always try to treat people with respect, but I was a very busy police officer. And if you hurt somebody, you went to jail. It wasn't personal. It just didn't happen. Okay. So I was like going to save the world. When I found out in law enforcement is a lot of times you show up late. And this night it changed everything. So that about 2:00 in the morning, one night, I got a call, respond to a house. A mother's screaming on the phone. Someone hurt her daughter. And we don't have anything else. We have an address. So I'm going. I get there. I beat my backup, which is always the case usually with me. So I beat my backup, and I get there, and Mama's screaming, and she's flailing all over the place. And I'm like, "Where's the little girl? Where's the little girl?" She's not listening to me. She's screaming. He hurt me. He hurt my daughter. He hurt my daughter. And I'm like, "Hold it, man. Please hold on." Nothing. My backup shows up. I said, "Good. You continue talking to her. There's a girl here somewhere. I'm going to go find where this little girl is." So as I enter the house, I'm a police officer, so I go, "Hello, I'm a police officer. I don't know who's in the house. I don't know if there's bad people. I don't know, whatever. I don't know. I'm just looking for a child, but I've got to be careful still." So as I enter the house, it's all dark. I don't put on my flashlight because I don't want to identify me, but at the same time, I'm a police officer, so they know who I am. Nothing. Can't hear a peep. I look into the kitchen, nothing. I look into the living room, nothing. As I walk a couple steps in the living room, there's a hallway leading further into the house, and I look down the hall, and I see what appears to be a small child. Can't really tell because it's dark, but again, about the size, and looks to be holding what is like a stuffed animal. So obviously, must be a girl, must be the child I'm looking for. So I start heading that way. Well, I go slow because there's doorways, and I go, police officer. Didn't know if someone was going to jump out, right? So police officer, and the child at the end of the hall, I could see was a person, but not really see anything. Just looked at me. No words, no comments, nothing. So I continued walking. "Hello, a police officer. I'm going to help you. Hello." As I got a couple steps into the hallway, a light came by. Either a car, it must have been a car going by, but I'm not really sure, or the moon hit just right, and the light flashed in, and I actually got a glimpse of the child. So I said, "Oh, okay." But I got distracted because instead of seeing a little girl or a little boy, what I saw was glitter, like shiny, like a shine, like a flashback. Like, whoa, what's going on? So it stopped me. Now, as I tell this story, I felt like it stopped me a long time, but it was probably a fraction of a second. But it stopped me for a second to go, "What's that?" And I continued on. "Are you okay?" As I got closer, a couple more steps, I could see what it was. The little girl was covered head to toe in blood. It was all over. That's what shined. She wasn't crying. She wasn't saying anything. She just looked at me. I got on my knee, and I said to her, "Are you okay?" She turned out to be a 6-year-old little girl. She looked me right in the eye and said, "Where were you?" In those days, I thought I had to have all the answers. So my response was, "On patrol." She didn't take that. She looked right at me and said, "You're supposed to protect me, and mommy's boyfriend hurt me." And I got my call. My call was, Mama woke up at 2:00 in the morning, couldn't find her boyfriend, went looking for her boyfriend. And when she found her boyfriend, he was raping her 6-year-old daughter. She yelled at him, and the coward that he was, he ran from the house into the woods and away. We caught him later. But what was I going to fix right now? How was I going to help this little girl? I spent 2 hours getting medical attention, taking care of everything she needed. But that was the night I realized that the best way to help someone be safe was to teach them how to be safe themselves. It took me a long time to get where I am today. But I started the DARE. I worked in DARE. I worked in any of the programs that came along, but they weren't exactly what these kids needed at different levels, but some more than others. But I couldn't find what I was looking for. But when I left that house that morning, it really did change me because the sun was coming up and my cruiser was sitting there, and on the side it said protect and serve, which in my mind was, from that night on, was false advertising, because the truth is, if I'm there as a police officer, a mama or a dad, I will protect you to the best of my ability. But if I'm not there, who's going to protect you? And law enforcement is not designed to protect you unless they're lucky enough to be in the place when it's happening. Most of the time, they are called when the victimization has already occurred. And that's why after 21 years in law enforcement, I left abruptly at the top of my career to do this, to do radKIDS, because the only way to help someone is teach them help themselves. I was fortunate enough to teach women safety for years. And actually they taught me how to teach them, which makes sense. And then what I found there was the same problem, is that many of the women that came to the class for self-defense, and it was a self-defense class, had already been victimized as children. And I went,
Yeah.
why are we waiting? Why don't we go to kids? Plus, I have a mind of a 5-year-old, so it's much better for me to work with children than adults. So that's kind of the truth. So that's how it all started. That's the night it all changed. And the cool part is, since this is the end of our podcast, to bring it all back and add a little bit more power, because that's kind of scary. Years later, few years later into radKIDS, I got to meet a radKID live. A radKID that escaped an abduction the day I was there. I was in Provo, Utah. My co-instructors were in the class, incredible people. And one of their phone rings, which we're not supposed to happen when I'm teaching, but it did. Their phone rang, and he answered the phone, and he goes, "Hey, Steve, add another one." And I go, "What do you mean, Dean?" And he goes, Provo PD just said a radKID, a little girl escaped an abduction, and she said, I used my radKIDS to get away. Well, the two parents started talking, so I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm going back to class, and everyone's kind of paying attention. And then his wife, who's also an instructor, runs out of the room. Mama Bear kicks in. She knows who the kid is, so she goes to the girl's house. So she goes to the girl's house. She comes back a few hours later. She's glowing. She's glowing, which is awesome. And then she goes, "Do you want to meet Candy?" And I said, "Sure." But I share this, and I know this isn't a law enforcement group, but I share this. I had hesitation. I said, "Sure, yes." But in my mind, when a child escapes, they're still hurt. That was my experience, right? Even though I was talking about all this, and escaping is escaping, okay? But she was still hurt. So I was kind of expecting to see someone who was hurt. Well, as we arrived at the house, we knocked on the door. Allison knocked on the door. She opened the door, which in radKIDS we teach kids not to do, but she knew who it was. She saw her. And they said hello, and I'm looking for a girl that's hurt, and this young little 10-year-old girl, she's standing there, and she goes, "Come on in." And so we invited in, and Allison goes, "Would you like to meet Mr. Steve?" And the little girl looks at me, and I go, "Are you Candy?" And she says, "Yes." And I said, "Are you okay?" And she looked right at me and said, "Yeah, he should have picked somebody else, don't you think?" And I went, wow.
That's power.
Wow. Yeah, when you think about, that was the blessing that I got. The blessing was she was okay, but the blessing I got personally was, wow, look what you can do. Look what you can do to change violence and victimization in children's lives. Not scaring them while you're teaching them, but preparing them with power to live in the world and to be and to thrive and do the best they can. And that's why I'm this crazy after all these years, because we've had a lot of children escape. To date, we don't know of anyone that has been hurt to a high level. We have, I will be honest with you, we've had a couple of children sexually assaulted who are after radKIDS, but once they escaped, the first thing they did is what? What do you think the first thing they did?
They weren't victim. They learned how to rebuild themselves.
So they went and told. That's right. They weren't a victim. They've been victimized, which you can't stop. You can be in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? That's why you need skills, because you could be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what blows my mind is they understood it didn't belong to them. And that's incredible power, especially having worked with women who'd been victimized for many years as well. So I share that with you. That's why I started. That's why I keep going, and I'll keep going until I can't breathe no more. But it's not me. radKIDS is made up of instructors and communities, and our mission is to empower communities. And in the military community, because I know many of you are in the military community, it has been a goal of mine to work with family services, to work with the military. Please, if you have any interest in this, contact us, because one of the things we say is a radKID warrior. And so that ties really close to the military as well. So I thank you for this opportunity, Niurka, and I hope you got something out of it.
I definitely did. And thank you so much for being my guest. It's an incredible story, incredible why, and incredible organization. So I'm honored that I can share your message with the rest of the world. You know?
I appreciate you doing it. And together we can make a difference, right? One child at a time. It's not that hard.
One child at a time.
One child at a time.
Well, thank you so much. It was for this time. So stop the recording.
Okay.